Welcome to Equipping Leaders, a podcast where I share and discuss resources, tools, and information to equip leaders to build creative, cohesive teams through culture and leader development. Welcome to the Equipping Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Natasha, and today I am sharing a conversation that I had with executive coach Annalyn Cruz on internal coaching and building your own coaching practice.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm going to start by having you introduce yourself and your style of coaching.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. Hi, everyone. My name is Annalyn Cruz, and I'm a leadership and executive coach. I would also say I'm an empowerment coach, and I could go into a little bit of what I believe that means and what that means for the style of coaching that I do for people.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, I got trained with the Coactive Training Institute, CTI for short. Many of your audience members probably are familiar with CTI. And when I think about the type of coach that I am, I like to think of myself as holistic. I coach people on their careers. I coach people on how they're showing up as a leader and where they want to continue to grow and stretch. What many coaches say that they coach people on, right? Career, leadership development, executive presence. And the empowerment piece that I was thinking about is empowering people to understand that a lot of the challenges that they're facing in their lives, they actually have the wisdom within themselves to get to where they want to be and who they want to be and the life that they want to go after, right? So my job as a coach is to help empower them to thinking about the CTI's model, to co-actively work with someone, to co-create some possibilities, right? And to unblock some of the saboteurs or the gremlins that come into our heads that tell us we can't do something or that we're not capable of it. All of that often keeps us safe in where we currently are, right? That's where some of the good things about a saboteur is that, you know, it's here to keep you safe and to make sure that you're not taking too many risks and that you're going to survive this world. And it's often BS. It's complete BS oftentimes. And so my job as a coach is, in my perspective, to allow someone to see the possibilities for themselves. Like, what are the dreams that they've tucked away and have told themselves throughout the years that they can't achieve this, or they're not capable of it, or that's not the type of leader I am. And to actually hold up what I often say are, well, here's a mirror moment, right? Like, here's actually what I'm seeing. Here is actually who you are. Like, this is what I know about you. And this is what I'm hearing, even if you haven't verbally shared it with me. So it's being a really, I would say, intuitive listener. Like, I think that that's one of my strengths as a coach, is to be able to actually see what's happening even when someone isn't verbally sharing it, right? I think that that's like the magic secret sauce that many coaches have, is that ability to see something and to understand the person without them even verbally saying it. So it's really looking at that deeper level of what is the life that this person is craving for themselves beyond even their career or their leadership capabilities. Because I think that goes without saying. And oftentimes when someone seeks coaching, but there are so many other parts of a person's life that I think becomes integrated in the coaching conversations that I have with my clients, which I love. I love being able to coach the whole person and be able to see these different dimensions of themselves that maybe sometimes they haven't even uncovered within themselves. So that's what I mean when I think about the type of coach that I am. It's an empowerment coach, right? It's someone who is going to help someone to go after the life that they crave. that goes hand in hand with my business and what I named it.
Ooh, tell us more about your business and what you named it.
I named my business Grounded in Wisdom, LLC. It is official now. And, I spent a long time last year kind of thinking about what that meant to me. And here's what came up. One, like I mentioned earlier, I truly believe that the wisdom is within us, and that sometimes we need someone or a coach or, a manager or a mentor to help uncover that wisdom that we actually have within ourselves, right? And there's also ancestral wisdom that I feel like is within each of us as well. It's in our DNA. It's something that's passed along within us, within our lineage. And so for me, being Filipino American, knowing the history that my ancestors went through is deep within me as well, right? And so my logo has a tree with roots underneath it, along with a circular way that the tree is being visualized. So meaning everything becomes full circle. The wisdom is within our roots, it's within ourselves, and we all have our own individual wisdom that we could tap into within ourselves. And sometimes we just need help, in seeing that. That is my business.
I love that so much. Really like that you said holistic earlier, because not only does it blend into the ancestral piece, but also I think sometimes coaches will label themselves as a certain type of coach. And I think that becomes very limiting to the client, where a coach holds space, right? So how do we move forward with that? And especially after COVID, people need a lot more than they used to. So I really appreciate that holistic perspective.
Yeah, and we've seen over the past year and a half, 2 years, right, that our work and our home lives blend together. They get muddled. We don't leave, one part of ourselves like at the door and then we step into another door and we're someone else. It's been harder for those of us who did do that before. When we would go into an office, we're not doing that, like people are working from home still for the most part. And I think it's allowed people to show parts of themselves, whether they liked it or not, to be a bit more vulnerable of, oh my gosh, my kid's coming into the room while I'm presenting at this really important meeting, or like my dog is barking in the background and really needing me at this moment, right? And so I think while the past year and a half to 2 years have been really challenging, what I've seen happen is that people have become more humanized, if that's a word. I think there's been more of this, I'm going to let my guard down a bit and be a bit more vulnerable and let people see parts of myself, of who I am, beyond what I've been showing up as in the workplace. And I think that's actually a good thing.
Yes, I think that people who think they're good at compartmentalization are not. Nobody ever really is, because we're a whole person, and the things that happen to us at home impact work, and the things that happen at work impact home. Yeah. And so I've enjoyed seeing that blend over the last couple of years as well, just because it's nice to see everybody, like you said, as a human, just as a regular person. We're all here trying, we're all here moving forward together, but I have certainly appreciated that human perspective that we've gotten from a lot of people, especially senior people, where sometimes they think that they have to uphold this image.
That's right.
And then more endearing to us, to everyone else, when you're like, oh, this guy's kid runs into the room and does whatever, but he's very sweet. You get to see these really cool moments that you never get to see in any other environment.
Absolutely. Kind of reminds me of something that happened to me many years ago, right? When I first started early on in my career, when I first started becoming a people manager, I took over this department whose entire professional staff basically left, for various reasons. And it was my first prominent leadership role in an organization. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Straight up. I thought I knew what I was getting into. And every day I was uncovering more and more messes or things that like I just had no clue how to do it or who to turn to, and I didn't get much support from the folks that were up top at the time, right? And I remember thinking to myself, I have to have all of my shit together, if I'm allowed to say shit on this podcast. So I thought I had to have all my shit together and not appear like I didn't, right? Like, it's like I wanted to appear like, oh, I'm all buttoned up, I know what I'm doing, I'm stepping into this role, and I'm gonna become the leader that they need. And I remember one day I just had what at the time what I would label like some meltdown, right? Like, it was just a meltdown in front of the entire team. And I was like, you know, we have this many people coming to campus. We have thousands of people that we need to prepare for. There are things that I'm still trying to figure out as we speak, right? And I just told them all the challenges that I was going through in that moment. And I'll tell you, like, that was like a very pivotal moment in terms of like my own leadership journey, because I can't tell you how many people came up to me afterwards and were like, thank you for sharing that about yourself. Thank you for letting us know that you're human. Thank you for allowing us to see you, you know, in these moments that have been really hard, because we had no idea. And so now there was a space that they could share that they were going through similar things, or that they had more empathy for what I was going through as their leader. And I think in moments like that, especially over the pandemic, that we've seen those types of moments where it's like, yeah, leaders are saying, I don't have my shit together. I just don't. And I feel like this is something I've never gone through before. But again, it humanizes people and creates more empathy, I think, for what each of us are struggling through day in and day out. And I think that that's just a really important conversation for us to have as leaders and as those who are working in different organizations, that, you know, when you actually show your cards a little bit, it helps break down those walls that people may feel initially based on like positionality or, you know, where people sit within the organization. It evens out the playing field a little bit more.
Remember in a previous job, when I was training the person who was replacing me, it was a senior leadership position, and he said, so what happens on a daily basis? I said, here's our regular battle rhythm, but in the morning you're going to get a call, and it's going to be about some insane thing that you've never heard of or had to deal with before. And in your mind, you're going to go, holy crap, I need an adult to help me solve this. Mm-hmm. You realize that you're the adult that they've called to solve this. And that's just what it is to be a leader, right? Is they come to you because of the resources you have, the access, the roadblocks that you can remove, and not because you necessarily have all of the information, but you know who to pull and how to move things forward, leveraging the people around you. When you can be more open and say, I have no idea. Great. Mm-hmm. Maybe somebody else does, or it opens up the space for someone to throw out their idea, and now we have a new idea to work with.
When you could be secure enough to admit that you don't know. And I think that, there's plenty of reasons why people don't want to admit that.
Imposter syndrome, in my experience as a coach, comes up a lot in coaching.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because you could tell someone till you're blue in the face, which you wouldn't in coaching, but you could tell them like nobody knows what they're doing. It's just like, it's okay, keep trying and keep moving forward. Kind of in those situations, what is your perspective on imposter syndrome? Mm-hmm. And kind of how people figure out ways to work through that?
I think imposter syndrome goes hand in hand with the saboteurs that I mentioned. And the way in which I think they're related is that our saboteurs, our inner critics, our gremlins, however way you want to label them, are the voices in our heads that tell us that we're not enough, that we are not capable of doing X, or that who am I to dream as big as this and pursue Y. I think when we start listening to those internal messages, which 9 times out of 10 are not true, but we start believing and internalizing these messages. And, sometimes it came from parents, sometimes it came from friends that we grew up with or a partner we've had, but it often is not the inner wisdom from ourselves, right? It is not that. But when we start believing in this, that's when we keep ourselves small. Like, that's what holds us back from really pursuing the lives that we want for ourselves. And so for me as a coach, it's important for me to start identifying when I start hearing those saboteurs come up. Okay, I'm going to pause you there. For example, if I was coaching you, right? Like, Natasha, I'm going to pause you there. That sounds like a saboteur that's entered this conversation. One of the things that I've done is to even have different names for saboteurs that come up, So again, the technique with that is, it's not me who is saying this. It's like, my saboteur's name is Fievel from back in the day. Fievel from American Tail, that small little mouse. He's cute, but he would come into the room and tell me that I wasn't good enough. Or it was just a way in which you could start identifying and naming if those saboteurs start coming into the conversation. And then to flip that, it's okay, well, who within your inner leader, or who from, let's pick another character who we could turn to that would actually tell you a more positive spin, or a place of coming from wisdom and knowing. What would that person say? So let me give you a tangible example of when this came up for me, like literally 2 weeks ago when I was working with my own coach. I was starting to get into the mode of, there's so much I need to do for my business. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I should be charging this amount for this training that I'm coming up with. And so my coach called me on it, and she was like, okay, let's pause. And she said, you just told me that you love Parks and Recreation and The Office, right? And I was like, yes. And she's like, so just let's play for a second. And she was like, what would Oscar from The Office, so any of you who are listening and you're fans of Parks and Rec and The Office, you'll understand my reference here. She's like, what would Oscar say to you about your finances? And I was like, he would say, you're charging this amount of money because of the value that the training holds, along with my expertise, and that I also have to pay my bills and think about my own 401k and retirement and all of this stuff. And so that's why I'm charging the amount that I'm charging. Very pragmatic, right? Like, very matter of fact. And she was like, well, what would Leslie say from Parks and Rec about who you are and, what you could achieve as an entrepreneur? And she would be like, I'm your biggest cheerleader. Of course you would charge that amount. You should charge even more than that, And so it broke me out of this whole spinning in my own saboteur of like, I can't do this, or who am I to think this of myself? And so, I think part of it as a coach is identifying when those gremlins start coming up for someone. And again, to be able to hold that mirror up to say, I know that you are worthy of this. I know you've been working so hard on your dream, right? So it's reminding your clients and your coachees about how far they've come, what they're capable of, and what's going to happen for them in the future that's even greater than what's holding them back.
Well, you were talking about working with your coach and working through different things. And recently you made a big change, going from an internal coach, facilitator, content creator, builder, architect, all the things. And now you're doing that on your own, in your own business. Yeah. So what made you want to make that decision at this point?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's something that I've thought about for many years. It's been a dream that I had in the back of my mind, and also I realized I kept putting on hold. So I'd work a little bit on it here and there, I'd be like, oh, well, I could come up with an Instagram handle that would do, this part of my business. Or like, oh, if I had my own website, here are the types of offerings I would do. So I was dreaming, I was creating, but it wasn't full time, obviously, because I was I had my full-time job for the past 5 years at a wonderful company with wonderful people. And I think that was one of the hardest decisions I had to make in my career, was walking away from something that I've enjoyed over the past 2 years, that I felt very connected to my team and to people within the business. And I knew there was something missing. When your heart and when your gut is telling you, okay, this is all right, like you could keep doing this, there's nothing wrong with this, but there was just something amiss and I couldn't shake off that feeling. And it was during the pandemic that I went through coaching certification. I worked with my own coach, and every conversation that I had with my coach, practically everyone, was about pursuing my dream to be my own entrepreneur, to have my own business, to coach and consult and do speaking engagements full time. And the more I thought about it, it scared me enough to be like, I need to keep looking at this and going for it. Because I could either stay in something that was comfortable, that was safe, that paid me well, or do I keep pushing off this dream that was not letting go? And there were times that I'm like, oh my God, I wish I wasn't feeling this way, because life would be more easy if I just coasted, right? And just stayed with what I knew. And there was just something eating at me from within, right? So again, going back to that inner wisdom where it just kept saying, like, that there's something more for you here. That you have to pursue this. And that's what my wisdom kept telling me through my own messaging. I don't know, my ancestors, everybody was telling me that you need to go for this, or else you're never going to do it. And so I just felt really, really compelled to take that leap of faith and to trust myself that, I have what it takes to become a successful entrepreneur. And I've seen moments of that, right, from my past of, oh yeah, I was the person who was doing the cold calls, or like in our, staff organization at Berkeley, I was the person who was talking to businesses about what we were about and getting them to fundraise for us, right? So there are moments that I started reflecting on from my past that I knew would go hand in hand with me being successful, being on my own. And I was half joking with my former manager at the last company I was with. And I said, honestly, like, you and like this job has prepared me to make this jump. Point blank. Like, this is what allowed me to kind of spread my wings and fly away, because now I feel so much more confident stepping into this space, knowing where I've been, right? And knowing what I'm capable of and what I could do so much more in a space where my calendar is my own. I have the time freedom and the complete creativity to do what I really want to do, and to create and make connections with people in the way that I think I wouldn't necessarily be able to do in my full-time role.
You didn't let it go just because it was scary, because a lot of times we do that. And you also mentioned just that, and you've mentioned it a few times, just that like ancestral wisdom, where sometimes my coach, who did not know my mother, but knows that was somebody who was very supportive, very impactful for me, would say, like, what would your mother say? What advice would your mother give you? And It would always be like, if it scares you, like, do not stop. Like, do not, unless it's a snake or a bear, unless your life is in physical immediate danger. But otherwise, there's a healthy amount of fear because we want to do well. It is new and it is different, and people are not going to understand it, but we have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people say this, but I truly do believe in that it has to scare you enough to know that you're making a healthy risk in what you want to go for, right? Like, there's just something within you that, of course it's important. Like, of course it's scary because it's that important to your life. And like, that's what you want to achieve for yourself. And if it felt too comfortable, then it's not a big enough stretch for you to actually pursue it. And that's the way I just thought about like my career shift. And, you know, I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like both of my parents had very steady jobs. Like dad was a civil engineer, my mom was a teacher, and those were the careers they stuck with throughout their whole adult life. And so for me to, you know, kind of step away from also that, I think, immigrant mentality of just keep your head down, be happy with the job that you have. If it's well paying, it has a pension, it has a 401k, right? Like all of these check the boxes of what some believe are enough for a career path. And for me, that just wasn't enough. And I know that there are going to be some challenges and bumps along the way, but I was willing to risk the safety of what I knew in order to create and be in charge of like what I really wanted to pursue and the path that I know is out there for me.
So I know you're still, as of today, you're still in the first 30 days, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It is the first 30 days. Yeah.
So far, are there any things that have surprised you about this transition that you weren't expecting that are positive or negative?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anything that surprised me? One thing I would say, you know, some folks who are entrepreneurs that I know said, hey, it could feel lonely at times, you know, because you don't have that team or that manager leader to tell you or just chat with you about the project you're working on. And so knowing that I do like working with people and I like collaborating and, you know, I like being able to co-create ideas with folks who I jive with in that way, I knew that was going to be important, stepping into this space. So right away, actually, I reached out to a couple of other entrepreneurs that I knew who were friends of mine. I'm like, hey, do you want to be accountability buddies? Like, let's, you know, or like, can we do a creativity session where we're just like brainstorming different ideas or possibilities of how to work together in the future, you know? So I would say that finding community and knowing that there are others who, one, have walked the path that I'm taking, and two, are currently on the same path, and we could help support each other, I think is really important. And then the other thing I would say is that there are folks who are experts in their field and who, you know, fortunately I could pay to do certain services or help me out with certain resources that is not my wheelhouse. So I think I have to keep reminding myself that I know that there are some things that I'm obviously good at and that's what I want to pursue, and here's where I'm creative and here's where I thrive. And then there are other things such as like website development that I'm like, do I really want to spend that many hours trying to figure out how to do this? Or is this something that I could have an expert work on for me and save my time, my energy? And yes, I would have to pay them, but ultimately it's worth it, right? Like if they're able to kind of take that off my plate and I could focus in on the things that really bring me joy and passion, which is one of the other things why I decided to go down this path is, you know, I kind of wanted to like KonMari, like some of the projects that I end up pursuing, right? It's like, I want to be able to take out the things that are no longer bringing me joy and to keep or to create, you know, the types of projects, initiatives that are really going to feed my soul at this point in my career.
I really appreciate also what you said about community, because we need it like in all areas. And sometimes I'll be like creating something and I'm like, this is an amazing idea. Of course it is. I've been working so hard on it. There's this sunk cost fallacy that because I've invested so much into it, it's gonna be great and we're not letting this go. But then when you can introduce it to other people and they're like, oh,
right.
Maybe not that direction, right?
Yeah.
Like, start, but then it went off the rails. But to be able to have thought partners, I think is so important. And I love the idea of just connecting for connection points and brainstorming. And there's this whole idea of like being productive means that you have to produce something. But I think that in community, there's this other type of productivity that feeds our creativity. And like I said, feeds your soul in just a different way. So how do you make those connections that you can work in your strengths?
Yeah. And one thing I would just add to what you just said about having thought partners, when you're creating something on your own, you could only be as good as what you're seeing in front of you. But when you have other people who could, going back to my improv background, right? It's like, who could yes and this idea and make it even better? And what am I not seeing that's right in front of me, or even possibilities that I can't see because of my own blinders that I have up? Recently, I was creating a series of 5 workshops around like confidence and executive presence. And I just chatted with an old grad school friend of mine, and she was like, hey, what about this? What about adding this part to, workshop number 4? And I was like, that's brilliant. I didn't even think about that. I think it goes back to diversity of thought and creativity that happens when, you go beyond yourself.
Yes. And I think it also demonstrates a really great lack of ego. They can do that, right? You have to be open to different things. But otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere. I really like what you said, too, though, about the people who are within your community are also on the same path or have been on this path, because then they know how to give you feedback that's effective. So they can say, no, that's not good, but let me tell you why, and let me give you an idea. When you're working with people who have been on the path or are on the path, they know what kind of feedback they would need or did need, or how to give it in that way. So I really love the idea of just commonalities in the community.
Yeah. And then I think also, what type of feedback are you seeking? Not just, do you like it? Yes or no, but it's like, hey, what stood out to you about session number 4? Or like, if you were a participant in this, what's missing from this subtopic? And just getting really specific and clear of what you're asking other people to provide you as well, I think would really be helpful.
And I love that it's such a coaching mentality. The ask great questions, right? That's what coaches, we ask great questions. But you're right. You're going to get the feedback that you asked for. Is this good? Yes or no? That's close-ended. For specific things, how did this land? Or, what were 3 things you took from this? And then they tell you and you're like, I did not think that, but great.
Or even, like, what else do you think is possible in what I created that I'm not seeing right now?
Yes.
I think that could open up all sorts of goodness, that even for the person giving the feedback, like, oh yeah, let's dream a little bit bigger from the constraints that we often put on ourselves. Right. And that's what I love about coaching as well, is that idea that we could dream bigger than what we're allowing ourselves to currently do. And sometimes I've asked my coach to, when she's like, what's our topic for today? Or like, where do you want to focus? I'm like, honestly, and there was one moment probably last year, about 9 months ago, that I said, honestly, I just want to start brainstorming some off the cuff, off the wall ideas about what my business could entail. And it could be completely silly ideas. Like, I don't want us to judge either way. Let's just like yes and each other and see what we come up with, because you never know what that quote unquote silly idea would lead to. And that's what we did. And I came up with about 19 different ideas when we said we were going to start out with like 5 or 6. You never know what could come or spark from that supposed silly idea. Like, there could be so much goodness that comes out of that one thing that then propels you forward into other amazing things. So, I think we tend to limit ourselves. And going back to the idea of imposter syndrome, I think that's what it is. It's a limiting belief about ourselves. We put a stop into what we could potentially be doing, or a stop to not even seeing the greatness that we have within us and what we have done in the past. I think we live in a culture where it's all about productivity and go, 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 go. Keep on trucking, keep on doing the things that you need to do. And we don't take enough time to actually celebrate what we have done, or where we've grown, or how we are a different human being because of this one experience, or how we are now showing up in the world. We don't take enough time for that typically. So one of the things that I've been really intentional about in the month that I've become this entrepreneur is taking those moments to actually breathe and reflect and meditate and give myself what I've now labeled on my calendar as think tank time, where I'm just going to take part of my morning. I've, blocked out 90 minutes to just think strategically or reflect on how far I've come so far, in order for me to be in this for the long haul. Because I know it's not a sprint, right? I know that this part of my career and what I'm building for myself is going to take time, and it's going to take intentionality to get to where I want to be, wherever that is. And I don't even necessarily have crystal clear picture, because I know life comes and sometimes we're not always prepared for what falls in our lap or what can happen.
Well, I love that, because I am a planner, and with that,
surprise, surprise.
And with that, I always find that I will point to somewhere that I want to be, and then I will just put my head down and get to that place.
Yeah.
100% of the time I've hated where that place was when I got there. So I really like that you said that kind of that end thing wasn't crystal clear. And I know that Tim Ferriss, he talks about these 90-day essentially sprints, right? And then at the end of those 90 days, reassess.
I mean, I think that that's it, right? When you're honest with yourself, when you're clear on your values and what you want out of life, then the path will just start opening up for you. And I truly believe that. Call it hippie woo-woo, whatever. But I do believe that when you are clear and you know what you're going after, and you have that dream of yours that is available, like universe, the world, God, Buddha, whoever you believe in, whatever you believe in, will respond. Like I just truly believe that, but you have to be crystal clear on what that is. And I'm not talking about the CEO role, right? Like this is not what we're saying. It's more like how do you want to show up in this lifetime? What's important to you? Like how are you going to honor your values every day in which you are in this body and being, And I think as long as you're staying true to those, then it will guide you in the right path that you are supposed to be on. But when I think about moments in my life that didn't feel aligned with who I was, or something within my gut felt like this doesn't feel right for some reason, and you can't quantify it necessarily, and you can't necessarily point to like specific things about whatever situation you're in. So for example, I'm going to try to make this more tangible so people are like, what is she talking about? I was in a relationship, a partnership for many years that never felt aligned with who the hell I was. And I kept trying to make it work. And I kept saying, well, we've been together for X amount of years, so I should keep going at it. I should. I was shooting all over myself about being in this relationship. And when it comes down to it, I wasn't honoring who I truly was authentically and what I wanted out of my life and the type of partnership I wanted for myself. I put that on the wayside, on the backside. I let that go, and I was not honoring myself in that relationship. And so I share that because I think you could use that in anything in your life, whether it's your job, whether it's your wellness or your mental well-being. There are just things that we know within. When your inner compass starts not telling you the right direction to go, you know that there's something up with whatever situation you're in. And that needs to be addressed, because guess what? That's going to show up in other parts of your life that will just impact you negatively. And I think that's what I'm talking about in terms of really reaching in and figuring out when things aren't sitting well within yourself, when your gut and your intuition is telling you that something's not right. That is so much more wise than what our brains will tell us, because our brains will convince us to stay in that toxic relationship, to stay in a job that is no longer serving my purpose, to just keep pushing and being productive even when it's harming my mental health. I would love, as a coach and just as a human being on this earth, to help people uncover those parts of themselves that maybe they haven't listened to in a while, and to do that gut check and that inner wisdom, inner intuition that we all have. But I think, given the culture that we're in, we often operate from the neck up.
And I know Jim Carrey, in a speech, he had said that oftentimes we do things out of fear disguised as practicality. A lot of people really, I know I've done that.
Yeah.
100%. So yeah, a lot of people do, because you can justify things because they're safe and it's fine, right? Like it's fine. It's fine.
Or it looks good, right? Like it's a good resume builder, or or it's like, oh, well, I've been in this relationship for 10 years, so why wouldn't I continue it, or whatever, I'm sure every listener who's listening to this has been in a situation where it no longer served us. So the question is, are you going to continue down that path and not listen to yourself, knowing that it's not aligned with who you are anymore? Or do you just keep going, even though it's not serving you? And to me, I never want to live my life in that way anymore, of basically abandoning myself and abandoning my values in order to go on this other path that is no longer serving me. Like, no longer gonna do that.
One of the funniest videos I've ever seen was a video where you demonstrated bad coaching practices. It was just like a 6 or 7 minute video. I've never laughed so hard. You did such a good job. Well, you both did. You and the person who is playing the client. Just one of you broke character and laughed. Meanwhile, I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard.
This is a what not to do coaching session.
So what are some of the quote unquote bad coaching practices?
Good question. So what I would label as bad coaching is, one, that the coach is doing the majority of the talking. I think that as a coach, your job is to listen and to take in what your client is sharing with you, and what are you noticing about their behavior or their mannerisms that is not necessarily being verbally said. So I think that's one, is you are there to be present, not, number two, to give advice and to tell someone what to do. This is like the biggest lesson that I've tried to kind of hone in with people leaders that I work with in terms of their coaching practice, is you are not there to tell them exactly what the path is that they need to take and to check off the list of how they need to run their life, or to run this project as an example, or where they need to go in their careers. Like, I know that there are some coaches out there who are like, no, I'm here to tell them what to do. And that's how I approached my coaching. And I'm just like, then you're not being a true coach, in my opinion. People are not paying me to tell them what to do. They are paying me to help partner with them and to co-create and hold up that mirror to show them the path that's possible for them, that is aligned with who they are and what they value and what they want to go after. And maybe they don't even know what that is, but I'm gonna sure as hell work my hardest to hold that space for them, in order for them to help them realize what that is, and we'll discover it together. And so what I've seen, and I've been guilty of this as well, right? Where it's like, sometimes we think we're being hired to be the experts in a certain topic. One of the biggest challenges I've seen within myself and with some people I know who do both coaching and consulting, distinguishing where the line is drawn and what's the difference between the two, right? So when you're a consultant, they are hiring you because you are an expert in thinking through systems or thinking through process or how to do a certain task and responsibility, right? And that's why you're being hired, to tell them the pathway forward. But as a coach, that is totally different, right? It's completely different. And you don't have to be an expert in someone's experience, for example, being the CFO, but you could still coach them on the challenges that they're having within their role or within how they're showing up as a leader or how they feel like they have no work-life balance or integration, And I think that's part of it, is just letting go of some of that ego stuff that we talked about earlier of, I am not the expert in everything, and that's okay, but I'm an expert in holding space. I'm an expert in championing someone. I'm an expert in being able to fully listen at a deep level to understand what may be going on with this person, and are they fulfilling their purpose? And are we looking at different perspectives so that they can have more balance in their lives? Or am I being present to what's happening right here, right now, somatically within their bodies, what's available to them right now? So that's what I'm an expert in, is doing all of that. Holding space, I know we've talked about this a couple of times, but I just want to say this is a hard skill to do. And not everyone can do it well. But as coaches, we are trained to do that in a way that's respectful, that is holding the client's agenda first, and being able to fully be present for what is. And being present, especially in this day and age, is such a gift for someone to receive. I truly believe that every person really just wants to be seen and heard and held in a way where their perspectives and their experiences are being honored. And I don't take that lightly. And I think most coaches really hold that to be true, and I think it's a powerful privilege to be a coach, to witness someone's transformation and to witness someone's dreams and goals that honestly they may not have even shared out loud ever to anybody. And I don't take that lightly as a coach. I take that very, very seriously, because it could be a very vulnerable space. And people have revealed things to me that, again, they've never revealed to anybody before. Their family members, their husband, their partner, etc. And so for me, it's an honor to be able to witness that and to help support someone with that.
You would think to honor another person, to listen to someone else, that it would not be that hard. But in today's society, because of how fast we are and how productive we have to be and all these other things, we will hear people, but we are not listening to anybody. So being able to really feel listened to and be able to hold that space. And there are times, I know, at least for me, where somebody says something and I'm like, I have an answer because it's my answer and it may not serve them at all. And that's completely unfair for me to take a lesson from somebody that they're trying to learn. Work very hard at doing nothing for the time that you are holding space and listening to someone.
Yeah. And within CTI, we talk about that as a self-management piece. How do we self-manage when, a client may share a story with you that resonates or that has happened to you or has happened to someone you love? And how are you able to hold that space for someone and be present for them and not have the conversation be about you and hijack that conversation into something completely different? I mean, it is hard. It is tough to self-manage. And that was one of the gifts that I got during my certification process was to get even better at that self-management piece and to not ask complicated questions. I would ask 3 or 4 questions in one oftentimes. So I have had to catch myself and be like, the simpler, the better. One of the questions that I love asking people and what my coach has asked me or what others have asked me during our coaching sessions is, what's here right now? What's important about that for you? Crisp, clear, open-ended, but could make a world of a difference in terms of what that person and how that person will respond to that very powerful question that seems very simplistic and is it enough of a question, quote unquote, but it oftentimes is.
Right, because it's up to that person's interpretation of that question for where they are. And I love that. I am also a double and triple questioner, double barreling them up.
Yep.
I know one of my favorite questions that my coach will ask me is, what are you pretending not to know?
And then again, I think it goes back to people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, right? If we believe that about our clients and our coachees, that they actually have what they need and you're just there to help uncover some of that, then your approach will be totally different. I think that's been the biggest thing that I've gotten within my training is to approach all clients that they are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, that they are not broken. I am not here to fix them. So going back to your earlier question about bad coaching, I think bad coaching is thinking you're going to fix people and you're going to fix all their problems and challenges. And it's like, okay, that's a totally different mindset and approach. And it's a very closed way in thinking about how to coach someone.
So how or where can people find you so they can learn more about you and your work?
Yes. Well, my website is currently under construction. However, people can find me on my LinkedIn. They can search for Annalyn Cruz. They'll see Grounded in Wisdom LLC, probably the easiest way to find me as of right now. And then you can learn more about what I've done in the past, what I'm up to currently. My email is annalynCruzCoaching@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Equipping Leaders. All of the resources mentioned in this episode can be found on my website, NatashaCheyenne.com. On the website, you can also find a weekly leadership journal entry, a resource page with challenges and downloadable content, a place to sign up for my weekly newsletter, and an upcoming leadership platform full of workshops. You can also follow me on Instagram @novel_Natasha and on Twitter and Facebook @NatashaCheyenne. If you'd like to hear more about a specific topic, please reach out and let me know. Join me next week for another episode.